Or in your case, it's, okay, everybody turn around and present something to your neighbor.
Yeah, that's a great advice, actually. I'm going to keep that one up my sleeve. So welcome, and a special welcome to David Allen. Delighted to have you here, David. David is the originator of the Getting Things Done methodology. It's all about productivity and, as the name has it, get things done. So really delighted to have you with me today, David.
Pleasure to be here, David. Yeah. Indeed.
And maybe, I'll just give you a chance to introduce yourself briefly about where the Getting Things Done methodology came from and what you've been working on.
Yeah, well, there's a much longer story than we have for
yes.
this little program, but I'll tell you, the very short version of that is I spent the last 35 years really uncovering how to surf on top of your world and stay focused while you're having a very, very, very busy life and staying nice and clear, and discovering the best practices, techniques that allow you to do that. And put that all together, and after thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of people that have been through a version of this methodology and refining it, figuring it out, refining it, and now distributing it around the world, finally wrote a book called Getting Things Done to package all that together, and then that kind of put us on the global stage.
Yeah, and that book was sort of a breakthrough. I think it brought it to a much wider audience. Right?
Well, it did. I didn't know, David, that I could virtualize what I'd come up with. I knew that if I had you my captive for 2 days, I could give you this, I could have you implement it, you could taste it, you could then, run with it. But I didn't know if I wasn't there, if I could put it in some sort of a virtual form and have somebody still get it. Yeah. And so that was actually a milestone for me to think that I could actually put myself or put the methodology into a book and see if it worked. So in 2001, when the first edition was published, that was a big milestone. The first weekend it was on the shelves in the US anyway, I got an email from a woman. She said, "Wow, David, I read the book, I implemented it, changed my life." I went, okay, so now it's possible to scale this. So that was a big change, was recognizing this was a methodology we could actually scale.
Yeah, and I think we have various audience for this this talk, and one would be coaches. I think other coaches, and I've often said to people who say, how can I build my coaching business? Build a methodology, build a set of steps that people can follow, and this feels like that is you have the ultimate methodology.
Yes, it really is, and it kind of boiled down to that. I did not wake up one morning with some grand epiphany. As I say, it's a long string of epiphanettes.
Yes.
I got a little piece here, then a little piece there, and mostly for myself to begin with. My life was getting more complex, and I was starting to feel confused, overwhelmed, wasn't sure what to do as my life was getting more complicated and busier. So for myself, having had an experience and a lot of experience in meditation, spiritual practices, and the martial arts, understanding the practical value of a clear head, lots of aspects of that.
Yes.
And so my head was starting to get muddied, with the complexity of life. So I was hungry, first of all, for techniques that work for me so I could stay clear. Then I turned around in my initial consulting and coaching practice and used the techniques with my clients, and it produced exactly the same results. More clarity, more focus, more stability, more sense of balance, more really space to be able to then think about the meaningful stuff and focus on it without being distracted. And then that somebody in the big corporate world saw what I was doing, said, "Gee, we need that in our whole corporation. Can you design some sort of a training around this so we're not reaching people one at a time, but you can spread this to a large audience?" And so that then I did, and it was successful, and that thrust me into the corporate training world.
Right.
And then, as I say, then it took me 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out, and that it was unique, and that nobody else had done it, and that it was bulletproof. That's when I had people coaching me said, "David, you need to write the book."
Yeah.
And so I put all of that 25 years of experience into the manual. It's a little daunting if people sort of pick it up for the first time to see all of that. Although it's simple stuff. It's like it's like the stuff you teach, David. Come on, it's simple, but it's the basics of it, and you're always going back to basics and uncovering another level that the basics will take you to if you do them really well.
Yeah, I think a methodology is about giving people a kind of a pattern to follow, a set of things that they can keep hold of in their life and keep coming back to.
Yeah, but it's not arbitrary like your stuff is. It actually is the way that you not only get things done, but get things done with the least amount of effort and distraction and stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, one of the ways that you've been bringing this methodology to the world is speaking on stage. So I was interested to ask you a little bit about your public speaking experiences. And do you remember your first presentation, by the way?
Well, I have to say, I had a little bit of a running start on this because my first presentation was at age 4. When I walked into the living room where my parents and some other people were in the living room, and I recited by heart a Bugs Bunny album record in front, and everybody thought, "Oh my God, this kid is so funny. He's so cute." And so there was. When I was a kid, I didn't want to be a fireman or a policeman or anything. There were two things. I either wanted to be a horticulturist or a comedian.
Right.
Because I loved planting and growing flowers as a kid, and I saw how couldn't put words on it, but I saw how healing it was for people to laugh. So I loved that. Jerry Lewis was my idol. So I had kind of that, I guess maybe a little bit of a DNA of a presentation thing. My mom then, my dad died when I was real young, but she pretty much raised me. And when I was 10 or 11, she saw that she would sort of nurture this, so she gave me acting lessons. So it turned out, long story short, I became sort of the child actor in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I grew up in the community theater, summer theater. So I had a number of roles. So I actually was on stage. This was by script. So it wasn't like I had to make it up.
Right.
But I had the experience of being on stage and lights and cameras and so forth. And so I got that helped ease the thought. And then I debated in high school.
Okay.
And I wound up being a champion debater, and that's where you really learn to stand up in front of, judging people and make it up, and kind of like and try to make that work. So those were some, those are some things that gave me, I think, a good bit of an advantage, for doing this. And then, of course, once I got into the getting things done world and that training world, I did an awful lot of seminars and coaches, and then keynote speeches. I think my biggest keynote was for 5,000 people. At one time. So I had a lot of that kind of experience. If I'd say, so it's kind of hard to say what was the first time that I actually, had or needed to do something like that. So I kind of was able to ease into it in that way.
And when you mentioned presenting in front of 5,000 people, do you find it a big difference presenting to 5,000 or 500 or 50?
Well, just psychologically there is, unless you've done that 20 times, like somebody like Tony Robbins or somebody probably like falling off a log. But I hadn't, so it was like, oh, what's that going to be like? But then, bringing to bear the things that I'd learned, called talk to one person in the audience, talk to the back of the room, don't just pick somebody, you need. So there were just some of the tips and tricks of just giving any kind of a presentation to groups that I was, had to bring to bear, for all of those things. A little bit of a difference, but I think once you get used to it, you just stand up and it's a conversation.
Yes.
And learning to then have a conversation, whether it's one person or 50 people, I think that's something I had to get used to doing that. And, it took a lot of experience to do it, but it happened. It's
funny, isn't it? Because when we're in front of the audience, it feels like the last thing we should do is a conversation. It needs to be a kind of a presentation. It needs to be a ta-da moment. And actually, I think the moments that people react best to is when it is conversational, when it's more connected to the real person.
Indeed. Well, one of the tricks I had, and I grew up in California in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the high times of personal growth trainings, and self-development trainings, the intensive, off-site workshops where you work on yourself, and and a lot of that was learning, something that later on I would say was the ultimate success factor to presentation. That's authenticity. So if I'm totally nervous and scared, I stand up and go, folks, I am totally nervous and scared right now. Hope you don't mind if I flub some of my stuff. I just have some important stuff to tell you, and don't let my inexperience get in the way of you getting that. If that's a real statement, and many times that was for me, then people they're totally forgiving. They get uncomfortable if you're uncomfortable.
Yes. I noticed that if something goes wrong with the tech, the advice I got from a musician was, you just tell people something's gone wrong, we're going to fix that, and then you go away, you fix it, you forget the audience until it's fixed, and then carry straight on. And the less that they feel that discomfort, the better it is for them.
And you can, there are also, really good tips and tricks. If I'm talking about GTD or productivity, I'll say, gee, folks, something just went haywire over here. A lot of this is about how do you deal with surprise. Guess what? I just got surprised.
Yes.
So let's see how well we can do it. So by the way, everybody take the next 5 minutes and see how productive you can be. Or in your case, it's okay. Everybody turn around and present something to your neighbor.
Yeah, that's a great advice. Actually, I'm going to keep that one up my sleeve, because normally what I say is, this has gone wrong, so that you know what to do when something goes wrong. So this is what you do, and then I just run them through this kind of pattern. So yeah, I think it's always about being ready. So
and then that said, as you know, I've done 3 TEDx's, and where you have to squeeze something into 18 minutes, you don't have a lot of time to be that informal in a way.
Yes.
You have to have a kind of informal tone, I think, to what you do, but there's a lot you need to get into 18 minutes.
Absolutely. There's a plan you need to have.
You need to have a plan. You need to, and I even doing recorded videos and so forth, I used to like to think I could wing them.
Right.
Like we're winging this. That's fine. We don't need teleprompters. But then I discovered one day with a teleprompter how much more natural I could be.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to, there wasn't some part of me trying to remember a script or what to do inside my head. I could just use that and then just be comfortable with that at the same time being a comfortable person. So there are things that you're not necessarily born doing, or even if you had a lot of experiences I had, a lot of hours on a stage, there's an awful lot of stuff to learn.
Definitely.
And as I've told you, I've had 3 different coaches for my 3 different TEDx's.
Yes.
And they were brilliant and surprised me. I mean, I guess, am I going, I've talked a lot. I don't know if I learned anything from a coach. And it's like, they sat me down and I, gave my thing, and they said, very politely and very nicely, they said, David, here's what was so cool. Here's where you had me. Here's where you lost me. And gulp. Okay.
That sounds great coaching, by the way. I'm going to keep that phrase in mind.
Yeah.
It's interesting because sometimes the coach starts with, okay, this is what you got to change. And especially when you're a little bit experienced or very experienced, I think that can really be a kind of a switch off.
Yeah.
So thinking about the TEDx talk, what was the biggest challenge for you? You've done 3 TEDx talks. When you think back on the first or the second, what was the biggest challenge for you?
I think the biggest challenge was my first one, because I'd never had been forced to take what I would consider my life work and put it into 18 minutes.
Right.
So it's like, ooh, okay.
Yes.
So we were smart enough. We made a good enough choice to then call on some of the best. We knew of Nancy Duarte's work in California, and so we decided. I knew Nancy from some other connection, and I said, let's hand this to them and see what they would do with it.
Right.
Because I had sort of my own shtick and I had my thing figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what my keynote would sound like. Here's what I'd like to, and they were very elegant in terms of what they did. So they had me deliver that to them, actually a room full of them, 5 or 6.
Wow.
And they were very, very nicely, took me apart.
Right.
Piece by piece. They said, wow, the first 30 seconds, I was so enthralled. And then after 2 minutes, you lost me. I was, there was way too much for them to try to integrate and try to do. So I had to swallow hard and listen to their coaching about how I had to simplify. I had to make it simpler. I had to add more emotional quality and story, essentially, to what I was saying. And they were challenging me, David, what's the best story you have that would make the key point you want to be able to make here?
Right.
And they challenged me, because I hadn't figured that out or done that initially. And that's what they had me do.
And when they talked about story, that was really something personal, something about your own life.
Yeah, so if anybody goes and looks at my Claremont College TEDx, the story starts with me on a sailboat.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, and also I remember you said that Nancy Duarte and her team, they had quite an influence on the graphics.
Oh, indeed.
On the slides and to support that story. How did that work out?
A lot. Oh, it worked out great. If you go see that TEDx, you'll see a number of their slides that they came up with. They didn't. Again, they didn't give me the content. They wanted to understand the content at as deep a level as they could get it,
right,
and then give their spin on how they would transmit that. Because I'd been doing this work for, golly, by that time, at least 25 years, maybe 30 years. And as you probably know, the longer you stay into this, the more you kind of get a little blindsided to, you need somebody outside the box to take a look at it from another point of view, and especially somebody has an expertise in that kind of presentation and that kind of storytelling. And Nancy is brilliant at it. I mean, she's great. I mean, her TEDx is wonderful.
Yeah, her TEDx is fantastic. That's really time worth investing, is watching Nancy Duarte's TEDx as well.
And they make the point, as you know, that the slides are not the story. Slides are the backdrop. They're the background. They add juice to it. They add a visual component and an even emotional component if you got the right pictures. For instance, in my first TEDx, where I talk about something as kind of out of date or old-fashioned that's not working, they came up with a slide of an old jalopy that was falling apart in an old overgrown field. I wouldn't have thought of that quite in the way they did, but they were able to see it from the outside with their expertise about knowing what kind of images, and also one image, one thought per slide. Of course, Nancy's, is sort of the author of Death by PowerPoint or whatever that was, where it's like, hey, come on, get rid of your text, on those screens, or minimize them, for sure, and mostly give yourself, visual, emotional component, as a backdrop.
I work with a slide designer. He says the same thing: one idea, one slide. Yeah, and I think that helps people to keep focused on the story. I mean, in the end, they're here to hear you speak, especially for a TEDx talk. Yeah. And the graphics are there to support.
Indeed.
Yeah. And when was the last time you still got nervous about presenting?
I get nervous every time I present. Okay. Only it's not nervous. You just learn to translate that to excitement or prep energy. Yeah. So as long as you change that around, every situation's kind of new and different. So it wasn't like a grand epiphany one time, but over the years, learning that, hey, I'm just usually I'll have more of that if it's something new that I have never really delivered before. Yes. So I don't have my grooves, I don't have my track, I don't have my stuff that I can trust, that the thing is naturally going to sort of flow out, where I actually need to work at it. And that's where practice helps a lot. Yes. Helps a ton. Yeah. To be able
and practicing out loud and
practicing out loud, hearing myself. I would... At the time, I was still living in California, so I still had a car and still had some long commutes. Okay. And so I would actually practice with my stopwatch or with, in the car. I would practice my talk to make sure I could get it within that time frame to see what it was like. And, nobody's listening to you.
Yes, it can be however you like.
Except myself.
Yeah. And that can be your own critic, but it's somehow your criticism can be more constructive when there's not other people around.
I never did what you should probably do, which is record yourself and play it back, because I can't stand hearing myself.
Right.
I still can't.
Yeah, but the practicing in the car, that worked for you.
It really does help. It does help to go through. As much as you'd like to think that you're really, really good at this stuff, especially if you have a condensed time frame and it's not something you have plenty of time to move around and to fill in the blanks and to feel your audience and see whether you're with them or not. That's also a big difference between a live seminar that I've done thousands of, over these 35 years. And when you're doing something where you can't necessarily relate to the audience, either it's like you're on stage and you can't even see them because of the lights, or you're doing something virtual where you don't have a live audience. So you actually need to kind of practice that. Absolutely. For instance, as we're talking here, so I'm talking to the camera, assuming now it's easy for me to envision 100 people or 50 people on the other side of that camera. Right. But it took me a while to start to get used to that. Hi, folks.
Those hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. Yeah. And to think a little bit about getting things done for entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of young startup founders, and people are changing their lives, their working lives. I think more and more people realize, hey, I could start something for myself. When you work for a company, quite often you get help with being guided on how to plan your day. Somebody will give you some kind of introduction to productivity, maybe get some training. But when you're an entrepreneur, you're out there on your own. And I think quite a few entrepreneurs say to me, well, I deal with that with my app. So they have an app for productivity. But it seems to me that there's something a bit deeper that's needed, some other tools. So how do you see that in today's changing world? How do you see it for those young entrepreneurs used to working with their phones, digital natives so-called? Where does getting things done fit in for them?
Yeah, well, as you probably know, a whole lot of the folks you've been working with come from a digital programming background.
Yes.
Right. In which case, they were all in a cubicle that nobody even knew they existed.
Right.
Right. So they didn't have to deal with interruptions, didn't have 25 plates spinning at the air all at the same time.
That's
with
true.
all these different multiple fronts of things pulling and pushing on them.
Yeah.
And so they think the app, which used to work for them because they had a simplified life that didn't have
Yeah.
that many moving parts. So as long as you put the right moving part in, a little bit of a streamline, and you could get from here to there, and
Yeah.
that, I know that's an oversimplification of an oversimplified life, but it really was compared to they're stepping out now and they have to be a party person, they have to be an accountant, they have to be the visionary, they have to be a motivator, they have
Absolutely.
to be, oh my God, now they've got all the roles of any CEO. Or
Yes.
anyone who's actually not even, more than the CEO oftentimes has an easier job, much like a very simple job, because their job is pretty well defined, the same committees, the same direct reports, the same
Yes.
people, especially if they've got their groove down where they're handing off an awful lot of stuff. Entrepreneur doesn't have that luxury. So they've got to really handle an awful lot.
Yes.
Now, it's not just limited to startup, high-tech entrepreneurs. Actually, the whole world is moving into more entrepreneurialism, even within organizations.
Yeah.
They don't have the resources to have lots of levels of management holding everybody's hand.
Absolutely.
They're expecting
That is
people to be
what I see.
self-starters. They're expecting people, especially if they've got a virtual workforce. Right, if you're virtual, even if you work in a company, you have to manage yourself. You have to have that kind of a lifestyle. But back to the entrepreneur, yeah, they are almost the hungriest group in a way. But if you're 24 and it's all an adrenaline rush, so what? They're not necessarily. But as soon as they have a kid and want to learn to paint as well as they're trying to manage a gazillion other things, that can get to them pretty easily.
Yes.
So that's where the hunger for the methodology I came up with starts to come into play. And interestingly, it's the most productive aspirational people that tend to take to what I teach.
Yeah.
It's their own productivity that's thrown themselves out of their own comfort zone.
Yes.
They've overcreated past where their systems could catch up with them.
Right.
And now they need to bring up the rear guard, go, God, how come I'm distracted by this dumb, dorky little stuff? Because I got bigger things I need to think about. No kidding, but you still have to handle that.
Yes.
So handling that, it's like I say, you either like what you're doing in case you want to do it better and more elegantly, and improve your ability to do more and expand it, or you don't like what you're doing, but you got to do it anyway, so you want to get it done as efficiently and as effectively as possible so it doesn't exhaust, it doesn't take wind out of the sails of the cool stuff you want to do.
Yeah.
Either way, getting much better at getting stuff done much more efficiently and effectively is going to serve everybody.
Absolutely. And yeah, again, the biggest trend in the world is speed and time. People don't have time, so they need ways to maximize what they've got and make the best of it.
As you know, there's a lot of speed up by slowing down that's needed too.
Yes.
So especially at the entrepreneurial level, for them to back off at least once a week and take 1 to 2 hours and back off and lift up and reflect. Almost anybody that I know, at least in the corporate world, who's dealing with executives or internal entrepreneurs, saying the biggest need is reflection time.
Right.
And so if you don't have reflection time, if you're just grinding it out, at some point there's no air left.
Yes.
And you're going to have to be able to then step back, take a look at all the different stuff. And as you know, you need to get stuff out of your head. And that's the problem, is most people are still trying to use their head as their office, and your head is a crappy office. Your brain did not evolve to remember, remind, or prioritize or manage relationships with more than 4 things.
Right.
That's now proven by the cognitive scientist.
Yes.
As soon as you are trying to keep track of more than 4 things in your head, you're going to tend to be driven by latest and loudest and not being free to use your strategic, intuitive intelligence to make good choices about what to do.
Yeah.
And that's what the Getting Things Done methodology, which is get stuff out of your head, decide what it means, what you're going to do about it, next actions required, projects that you need to be completed, keep all that externalized in some external system that you review and reflect on regularly, so it frees up your head to what an entrepreneur can do very well, which is vision, use your intuitive intelligence, making good, spontaneous, intuitive decisions about that, not that, not that. But trying to do that, if it's all in your head, is virtually impossible.
Yes.
Much easier to do. As a matter of fact, it's now possible if you get all that stuff out of your head in some external map or orienting kinds of things. Anybody watching or listening to this who's looked at their calendar in the last 48 hours is already doing a version of that.
Yes.
Like, you can't keep it in your head. Why do you have a calendar? Because my head can't do it. No kidding. Right? Why do you look at your calendar? To locate yourself in space and time, so you know where to be next and you know how to kind of orient yourself over the next period of time. No kidding. So if you're doing any of that, that's the principle of what getting things done is, but very few people are taking that to the level that it could be taken to. And Entrepreneur is a very ripe place to actually implement that process.
I think so. And you're also a big fan of actually writing things down, of getting things out of your head by writing things down. This is one of the hearts and souls of the methodology. And I still find that people say, yeah, but I write that on my phone. Now, my personal view on this is I find things are more sticky by physically writing stuff down compared to writing stuff on the phone. And there's also a little bit of shrinking things down to the phone screen, whereas once you write stuff down on Post-its or on notes, things become more real, more out there, a bit more easy to visualize, a bit more easy to organize. How do you see that distinction?
I think that's probably true. I don't make that distinction in terms of the methodology. You can use anything, as long as you... The problem is that a best practice is not just to capture it, but then sooner than later to look at it again and decide what it means and what you're going to do about it.
Yeah.
So the capture or collection process is very different than the reminder process and organization process. You need to gather all that stuff out. The problem is if you're using a phone for that, that can be a black hole. Did you put it in Evernote? Did you put it in Apple Task? Did you put it in Dropbox? And it's going to very potentially lie fallow there.
Yeah.
And so if you can stick it in there and have the discipline, and that does takes a habit, once you get used to it, of making sure it doesn't lie in there. That you then get it back out again so you can look at it in the face and go, wait a minute, what's the next? Am I going to do something about that? What's the next step on that? Is there something I need to keep track of to finish about what that stuff is? And that's the second and third stages of how you get stuff under control, is you capture it first, but then you need to look at it and clarify exactly what it means, exactly what you're going to do about it. Is that reference? Is that a crazy idea you want to park for a while? Is that something you actually need to move on right now? And that's the clarification step, which is an important step most people don't quite get to like they need to, about all the stuff that they do capture. So you can write it on your butt if you want to. It doesn't really matter as long as you look at it soon enough and then decide what it means and what you're going to do about it.
My personal feeling about this is probably it makes sense if you choose an app. We use Slack in my business quite a bit as a place to capture stuff, but we also use some of those other tools. So I'm starting to think as we speak, maybe we should choose one. And actually that seems to me the outcome. If you really, somebody who likes to capture things digitally, then find one place. Try to keep things in that might need action in one place, so that it's easy to review it and easy to make decisions about where does it sit.
Yeah, well, a couple of friends of mine who actually live in Amsterdam, who are long-time, decades-long GTDers, developed an app called Brain Toss.
Okay.
And what that is on my iPhone, I can then record, picture, write, or whatever, and it instantly goes into my email box, not into some black hole in the phone.
Wow.
So they organize it knowing that you're okay to capture in whatever virtual tools you want, but make sure that gets into the pipeline that you're going to see and put in front of you. And because I empty my in-basket, my email in-basket every day or two, then that will get handled. So that's an elegant way to deal with that.
Yeah.
If you want to be in the digital world, but quite frankly, come on. I'm a pretty high-tech guy, but there's still nothing better than this little sucker right here, because this no clicks, no battery required, no Wi-Fi connection required, right here, and this goes with me anywhere that these little plastic things go, and that's pretty much everywhere, with a wicked cool little pin that I carry with me. So that's with me everywhere. And most of your good ideas, by the way, about work won't happen at work. The more sophisticated you are, they happen offline somewhere else. So if you only want to have that idea once, and by the way, if you want to talk efficiency, don't waste your time and energy, only have a thought once, unless you like the thought. There's no reason to have a thought twice, unless you're just not. The only reason you'll have a thought twice, I should, I need to, I got to, or whatever, if that pops in twice, you're not handling it effectively.
Right.
You're wasting cognitive energy and exhausting yourself.
Right. So being efficient, it's actually in the end to be having time to do stuff that you actually want to do. Right?
Exactly. Not only that, it's just so nice to have a clear head.
Yeah.
It's not about, funny, Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who did flow and all that stuff, his big aha, he thought that people would move into the flow state more in their personal life than in their business life. The big thing was he discovered that 80% of people, 80% of the time they were in flow was at work.
Right. Wow.
Just because of the combination of factors of challenge and completion and engagement and so forth, that happens, there all the time. So the whole idea of that, I want to just do nothing or be relaxed and be in my personal life, that's not necessarily where you're going to be the most creative and the most productive. You may be productive anywhere. You just want to be in flow at work. You want to be in flow watching your girl play football. You want to be in flow no matter where you are.
Absolutely.
In order to do that, you've got to have these tools, and though they're simple behaviors, write it down. Everybody knows how to write things down. Yeah. But do you write it down while you're doing something else so that that thought doesn't have to happen more than once and it goes into your system and gets transferred into your orientation maps so your head stays clear and easy?
Yeah. A mind like water.
Well, that's the way to deal with the surprises. See, as an entrepreneur, you've got in spades what everybody's dealing with, which is the speed of change and surprise.
Yes.
Hey, folks, anybody listening or watching this right now, there's something coming toward you in the next 2 to 3 weeks that's going to throw you for a spin. I guarantee you it's going to cause you to refocus, reintegrate, recalibrate, and refocus. Again, trust me, write it down. You'll see what I'm talking about. So nothing's new in the world except how frequently things are new. Yeah. And an entrepreneur's got that in spades.
Yes.
So you better be ready. That's why my second book was called Ready for Anything. You need to be ready in that state so that you're not over or under reacting when new things show up. So that's why when I'm not doing anything else, I'm cleaning up all my backlog of collected stuff to zero because there's a surprise coming toward me I can't see. Sure. And when that sucker hits, I want the ability to be able to make a quick intuitive judgment call about do that or not, but I need to know what all the other stuff is that I might be leaving behind if I do that.
Right.
So you can only feel good about what you're not doing if you know what you're not doing. And so the big challenge for entrepreneurs is to keep an inventory of what you're not doing, and make that okay.
Yeah. Great stuff. One last tip for anybody who's got a big talk coming up?
Relax.
Relax. Get your mind like water.
Yeah, relax and find a good coach. Find somebody that can, even if it's your life partner or somebody that'd be willing to listen to you and feedback. Hey, dear. Yeah. You kind of lost me when you did that. That was really cool and that was really fun. My last two coaches have been brilliant at that. And have helped me a lot.
Great stuff. David, thank you so much for coming along. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure, David, always.
Thank you.